And I think timing is so important, but you have to grab the moment too. There's no question that my own idea about what makes good food writing started with that huge tome, Mastering the Art of French Cooking. And the reason that it was so revolutionary to me, I had spent about 3.5 years in France. It was just during the period that Judith and her husband Paul were there. We never met, but we once even lived on the same street. And we both had that awakening, that epiphany, if that's not too cliche a word, of realizing that what the French had in their attitude toward food was a whole way of life that we wanted not only to emulate for ourselves, but somehow to take home and tell others and share it and spread the word and get people out of the sort of doldrums of Puritanism that food was something to be, you had to prepare it, but it was demeaning for the poor little housewife to spend her time cooking. So buy our products, and it goes way back to the 19th century. But Julia somehow lifted the lid off that. And what happened to me when I came home after my 3.5 years in Paris was that one, you couldn't find the ingredients. You didn't find fresh mushrooms, fresh herbs of any kind. Nobody ever heard of shallots or leeks or you name it. I mean, and the cuts of meat, everything was different. So it was very hard to translate what I learned in Paris, and I learned mostly by asking people, asking the butcher, the baker, how his wife made so-and-so, and I'd go home and try it. And I was desperate for a really good cookbook that showed me the techniques that made that difference between just an ordinary boiled meat dish and a soigné bœuf bourguignon, as Drew would say. And all of a sudden, I was working at Knopf. I was working mostly as their French editor, working with translators and writers like Camus and Sartre and so on. But everybody did know that I liked to cook, and I'd spend that time in Paris. So when this huge tome came from our scout in Boston, landed on my desk, and I saw it was all about the techniques of French cooking, I just felt, somebody's answered my prayers, and I took it home, and I must have spent a month with it before I reported on it. I did a lot of dishes, and I did the famous bœuf bourguignon. And the reason, I think through studying that recipe, you understand what Julia really did in this book. First of all, she tells you what cut of meat. Then she tells you how to dry it. Then she tells you to use some fat beside butter, because butter alone will burn. Already burned 3 lessons. Then why you braise the garnished vegetables separately and what they bring, how they caramelize and so on. It was just a revelation, because I knew that I would make the best bourguignon I'd ever made. I did. Evan and I sat down to dinner, we couldn't believe it. So I made a lot of recipes, and it was so full of enthusiasm. Now, I knew the book had been turned down by the Boston publishers, and they actually called Mrs. Child in and said, Mrs. Child, no woman in America, woman, you get the word, no woman in America wants to know this much about French cooking. Well, I did, and I wasn't going to let it go, and I can be stubborn. Also, I was very lucky because Knopf was a small publishing house, and Mr. Knopf was I guess you'd call him a great gourmand. He never went in the kitchen, but he was an appreciator of food. He belonged to Wine and Food Society. He couldn't believe it when I wanted to do this book. By a Smith College woman telling us about French cooking, he's crazy. But he let me have my chance. I shall be forever grateful to him. And when I told him, by then I was writing to Julia, and we were fine-tuning things and working on the title. And I told Alfred that we had decided to call it Mastering the Art of French Cooking. Mastering, because it's a continuing process. And he shook his head and he said, if a title by that name ever sells, I'm going to eat my hat. And I thought, you think about hats yet? I hope they were adjustable. Anyway, so that got me started on working with cookbooks, and I felt with the success of Julia, because a lot of it was due to the fact that she just happened to get on a little program in Boston. It was a sort of a literary program, and she took along her omelet pan and her Bunsen burner, and she was flipping omelets, and people in Boston, they never had so many letters, said, get that woman back on television, and sure enough, WGBH did, and she changed forever the way America thought of food, I think. I think she released